This is the last part of a World War II US Army classified document from the United States National Archives entitled Southampton and Southern Ports, describing the run-up to D-Day. The most astounding comparison probably was that of the number of ships unloaded by the port since it had been overseas, placed alongside the number loaded out during the month of June. The total ships unloaded by the 14th port in its year overseas was 220. The total outloaded during June was 215. These figures, however, did not reflect the true tonnage comparison. The total tonnage discharged was 509,000. That loaded in June was only 34,000. The obvious reason for the great difference was the relatively light weight of the vehicles loaded on motor transports. An officer courier service was inaugurated during June by the 14th port for the purpose of expediting valuable ships' papers to the Normandy beaches. In the beginning, couriers used both Navy dispatch and planes. Presently, an efficient flying schedule assured rapid delivery of documents and a prompt return of the courier to his duties. Reverse Lend-Lease payments for shipping activities at the end of May totaled $1,016,000. During June, port operations were so great as to bring the total to over $1,225,000. This meant that June charges amounted to almost 25% of the entire previous year's total. The port's finance section suddenly found themselves dealing in francs when the invasion came. Wounded soldiers and returning glider navigators wanted their invasion currency reconverted to the British standard. An additional salvage project was that of reclaiming damaged motor transport and cargo vessels. These craft, damaged by underwater obstacles during their voyage to the French coast, were towed back to the port area and beached. Thereafter the salvage work began, with the 499th Port Battalion furnishing the labour. Under the jurisdiction of the 13th Port, Colonel C. A. Noble commanding, the total discharge of cargo at the ports of Plymouth and Falmouth for April rose to 40,000 tons. This compared with a total of 32,000 tons discharged during the 8 weeks preceding the 1st of April, which represented an increase of 250% in the tonnage per week rate. 3 outstanding incidents occurred during May, namely the construction of a tent camp and opening of operations at the subport of Fowey, the setting up of a complete staff and strength for operations at the subport of Falmouth, and the completion of the barge programme at the yards of Totnes, Devon, where the construction of 400 wooden barges was completed 2 weeks ahead of the 1st of June target date. As per previously elaborated plans, the 13th Port undertook a programme of operational outloadings. The initial phase of this programme called for the loading of 12 dumb barges at 1,000 tons and 18 LCTs at 200 tons, a total of 15,600 tons according to pre-stowage plans. This entire phase was completed during May. During the period, normal discharge operations continued at a record rate. Plymouth discharged 40,892 tons from 51 ships and Falmouth discharged 8,732 tons from 6 ships, which made a total of 49,614 tons for 57 ships. These figures reflected one of the highest sustained rates of discharge operations experienced in the sub-ports, and it was of interest that this cargo was received and handled in spite of official notice having been received that further imports would cease. There was as many as 17 transatlantic craft discharging at a port during a single day. The average of tonnage discharged in the ports per day was 1,000. Operational outloadings in the sub-port Plymouth were divided into dumb barges and Navy LCTs. The sub-port Fowey handled dumb barges only. All craft were to be loaded according to pre-stowage plans. It was found that in almost all cases the pre-stowage plans exceeded the capacity of the craft. In the case of the barges, where an average of 1,000 ton per craft had been projected, it was necessary to increase the number of craft from the original 12 to 20 in order to accommodate the prescribed load. This was an underestimate of 40% of the carrying capacity. In order to handle the increased operations at all points, operational personnel was expanded more than double over the previous month. A special traffic group was organised to regulate the flow of land-borne cargo to the operational vessels and to prevent any conflict of congestion with the heavy counterflow of land traffic emanating from discharging operations. This was accomplished by ordering all incoming rail cargo, which constituted 99% of the total cargo moving for operational loading, into a marshalling yard and then calling it forward as required at the loading stations. On D-Day, loading of motor transport vessels began as scheduled. The first vessel was completed at 2300 hours, 6th of June, in 15 hours loading time. The first 3 vessels in the programme, 1 from Plymouth and 2 from Falmouth, cleared port and joined convoy at 0400 hours on the 8th of June. The first coaster in the store's build-up programme arrived in Plymouth on the 9th of June and loaded petrol. It sailed on the 11th of June with 373 tons. The first ammunition coaster arrived in Fowey on the 12th of June and sailed on the 16th of June with 825 tons. The loading time of motor transport vessels was progressively reduced until a record of 5 hours for 120 vehicles was achieved. Sailings of motor transport vessels were temporarily suspended for 5 days during the disastrous gale. Construction of steel 104 kd barges at the Hayle yards and at Truro, Cornwall, under the 13th Port supervision, continued with production figures totalling 253 barges. The problems attendant to operating 3 separate installations, London, Hull, Immingham, were evident to the 12th Port, with a constant shuttling of men and officers to and from the detachments and headquarters. Nevertheless, they surpassed all former operators of the port in the dispatch of cargo. During the first half of April, as listed on the comparative performance of overseas ports, this port had a standing of 2nd place in the UK in reference to net discharge data. However, the tonnage figures of this port decreased in proportion to the number of days to D-Day. During the period of 15th of May through the 21st of May 1944, a general reduction of files was dispatched in all sections, with all unnecessary papers being destroyed to bring the various administrative impediments to an absolute minimum, which in days to come would prove its benefits by being instrumental in attaining the goal of the organisation in its next move, that being to travel with the barest necessities of administration and not to be encumbered or retarded by unnecessary packing boxes. Preliminary preparations were carried through for the eventual moving of the organisation. This included the requisitioning of officers and enlisted men to bring the organisation up to strength, requisitioning of needed supplies, packing of all equipment not necessary in the administrative and operative branches of the unit was carried out, with the result that the entire organisation could be on the rails, wheels or water within 12 hours.